This is the other gospel of the day, kind of on the same note as the one that Tom read for us. This is from Luke. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Be dressed for action and have your lamps lit. Be like those who are waiting for their master to return from the wedding banquet, so that they may open the door for him as soon as he comes and knocks. Blessed are the servants whom the master finds alert when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will fasten his belt and have them sit down to eat, and he will come and serve them. If he comes during the middle of the night or near dawn and finds them so, blessed are those servants. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. The Gospel of the Lord. Our first reading today was from Mark, and the second, which I just read, from Luke. And both readings are similar to verses in Matthew and John. And they all speak of being ready and alert, ready for the coming of the Son of Man. But even with similar verses, the readings can confuse as much as clarify. Jesus is speaking of a future time, but he can't give an exact time, because about that day or hour no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Creator. The Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Some people will believe in Jesus, and some won't, and some will be drawn to his goodness, and some won't. But Jesus promises that all who come to him in humbleness, he will raise on the last day. Now, this promise isn't exclusionary. It doesn't mean that faithful Jews and Muslims and those of other faiths don't get to go to heaven, because heaven's gate swings wide. But Jesus is saying that those who believe and follow him do have a wonderful assurance. In the gospel, Jesus is referring and reassuring his little flock that the kingdom is prepared for them. However, they and we shouldn't be complacent. Because even as this reading is meant to reassure, it still has some confusing aspects. And the reading always brings to mind two distinct images for me. The unexpected hour of the last day, for me, has a double meaning. One is the big last day, the second coming when Jesus returns to reign. But the other last day is the last day of each human's life, each of our lives. The first image I have began on the expressway, 490 East, and I had our first grandchild, Ryan, with me in the car. I had just picked him up from kindergarten, and he was going to spend the evening with us. Now, Ryan lived with his mom, but every Sunday, Ryan went with his dad to St. Mary's Catholic Church in Rochester. So, at age 5, he sat through a whole Mass every week. Now, as Ryan and I rode toward Fairport, we crested a slight hill. It was a fairly clear day, and we could see quite a way in the distance. And Ryan turned to me and said, matter-of-factly, "Grandma, is that heaven up above?" And Grandma, I was wondering, when is the last day? I had attended many churches, including Catholic ones, so I knew a lot of hymns. And I took a deep breath, and I said, "Ryan, do you mean like the hymn from church that says, 'I will raise you up on the last day'?" He said, "Yeah, that one." "Well," I said, "first of all, that isn't heaven up ahead. It's a beautiful sky that God made, and I think heaven is even prettier. And the last day in the hymn is the time when people get to go to heaven. Many people are already there, like your great-grandma. And when people are very old or very, very sick, they can go to heaven." Well, I waited for the next question about the last day, but there wasn't one. Instead, he just said, "Oh, okay, is there any candy in the glove compartment?" Well, there was candy, and we ate it, and we drove on home. Ryan is now 37 years old. He lives in Portland, Oregon with his wife, and he has no memory of that day. I asked him, but I did send a little copy of this. The answer I gave him as a boy was sufficient for a 5-year-old, but perhaps as adults, we need a lot more. My second image of the last day came in the spring of 2009. I was taking a class at St. Bernard's School of Theology and Ministry, and the class was small. There were 4 men and 1 woman, me. Our professor was Rosalind Caravan, and Rosalind was a great teacher, very demanding, and we had lots of papers to write. I sat next to a man named Larry. He was a lay minister from the South. He was 6 feet tall, African American, about 50 years old. He was solidly built and very soft-spoken. He was actually a student at Colgate Rochester Divinity, but he was taking this class at St. Bernard's to finish up his degree. And when we read our papers aloud, I could glance over and see Larry's paper, and I could tell he had trouble typing. And he struggled with his writing and his research and his composition, and his papers were very short, but they were sincere as he was. He was a man of good humor and great faith, and he was determined to complete his degree and become ordained by that June. But in May, I got a call from our professor. Larry had been found dead in his room at Colgate Rochester, and rumors swirled as to his cause of death, but one fact was known. He hadn't been able to complete all his requirements for graduation, and those who knew him were shocked and saddened, but we all made plans to attend his funeral. Have you ever been to a traditional Southern-style black funeral? You can learn a lot. Larry's service was held at a large city church in Rochester. He lay in an open coffin, dressed all in white. We filed past, nodding to the family and marveling at the many flower arrangements. And next to the casket was a large poster-sized portrait of Larry in a band uniform from his undergraduate days, with a red coat and brass buttons and gold braiding and a tall plumed helmet. And the service began with psalms and music, and the message was given by a professor from Colgate Rochester. She read from 1 Corinthians 15. We will not all die, but we will all be changed in a flash, in a twinkling of an eye, in the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. She gave quite a message, first softly, then a little louder and a little louder, always returning to 1 Corinthians and the raising at the trumpet sound. Well, she was mesmerizing, and at the end she assured us of Larry's destination, of his call, of his journey to heaven. And then she paused. She pointed to that big poster of Larry's picture, and then we saw it. Larry, in his red band uniform, was holding an instrument, his trumpet. So here is the question. Would Larry have to wait for some future last day to be raised up? No one in that service would have said he had to wait. Everyone there was of one mind. Larry was already raised, and he had a job to do, playing his trumpet for God. But even after a funeral like that, in classes and churches and in our minds, we may still have to wrestle with some of the other scriptures. In Paul's first letter to Thessalonians, Paul speaks of Christ's second coming. Now, the Thessalonians were new Christians in need of instruction, and Paul thought that Jesus was returning next Tuesday. He thought Jesus was coming any day. And Paul wanted the Thessalonians to be assured that when Jesus arrived, their recently dead relatives and friends would go to heaven right along with them, the living. And Paul said, "For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command and the voice of the archangel and the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. And after that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so be with the Lord forever. I call this reading from Thessalonians PMP, pretty much Paul. And Paul truly believed that Jesus was returning any moment, and that the new Christians should live their lives with that in mind, being prudent and sharing with one another in love. Well, you can't really argue with that. Our confusion comes when we try to talk about the end times. There have been a lot of books and few films about the end times showing people plucked up to heaven while others were left behind. Well, rather than have a big discussion about the imagery of Revelation, about its apocalyptic style of writing, I think it's best to look at the Gospels for the final word on things and to maybe answer some of our questions. When will Jesus come to reign over all? Shall we count earthquakes and wars and make calculations as to the final day? And what about our last day? When and how will Jesus retrieve us? Do we have to wait in the grave for the last trumpet? Jesus doesn't give us a timetable. He just says, be ready. But about that day and hour, no one knows. Neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Creator. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know the day your Lord is coming. You must be ready for the unexpected hour. Here and in other Gospels, Jesus is prompting us to live our lives in readiness. In effect, he's saying, if you don't know the hour of the day, then why not live as if today is your last day? What if today is our last day? The last day to forgive someone, or the last day to love and care for someone, our last chance to write a postponed letter or make a difficult phone call, our last day to smile and lend a hand to a stranger. Well, that's a good lesson for us to remember, and it's a good model for our lives. But did we get our questions answered? What do we know for sure about the last day? I think we know nothing and everything. We don't know when Jesus will come to reign over all the earth, and we don't know when our last day on earth will be. Yet, we know the truth of the gospel, and from that, we know everything we need. In metaphor and truth, Jesus tells us everything. He says, my Abba Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And I will come again and take you to myself. When we believe that, it all becomes clear. The timing, the day, the hour, that isn't known to us. But the promise of the resurrection is known to us. We have Jesus' promise to us, and it is our blessed assurance. Jesus is life, and we are his. We've been drawn to him, and he will keep his promise. He will raise us up on the last day. Amen.